Almost started. Hey, sons, it's Blind Run with Son of a Tech once again, and joining me today is Sumitoma, the chief architect of Dynex, and we are going to be discussing all things Dynex. And of course, the most recent news is the Dynex hack on the Discord. So we'll be covering that and getting a few ideas on what happened there, some of the social engineering behind it, and of course, the main focus still is going to be the technology behind Dynex, where it's headed in the future, and all things Dynex. Because I think, if I'm not mistaken, this will be the first time that anybody's interviewed you. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
Hi
cool.
there, by the way. Thank you so much for taking your time on a Sunday.
Thanks for coming on. I think you've been very elusive. I think a lot of people are going to be interested into hearing your side of the story on everything. Yeah, I mean, definitely an interesting project, right? We've been hearing the term, proof of useful work being thrown around for quite some time now, a couple of years, right? Maybe
Yeah,
even longer than that. Starting out really getting popularized with that term from the project Flux,
yeah.
and I think has been thrown around in a couple other smaller projects that really not never got off the ground. And give me the rundown of what your definition of proof of useful work is, because I think that's a term that could be utilized in multiple different facets, right?
Totally agree. And basically, let me give you a little rationale behind what we are doing and why we are doing what we are doing, right?
Uh-huh.
And that will also bridge nicely what's our point of view between proof of work and proof of useful work. So basically we started 2020, right, with researching into alternative computing paradigms. And why? Because we believe that we are running into some sort of a bottleneck at one point, because Van Moore, it's not possible to make transistors smaller, right? At one point, we need other mechanisms, other technologies to speed up computations, right? And especially if you combine that with the ever-growing demand for artificial intelligence computations, we're going to run into an issue at one point.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a lot of research going towards, okay, how can this be done differently, right? And also in a way that which is basically practicable, right? Because quantum computing is great, but it's not really practical to have a quantum computer at home from a pricing perspective, from an operating perspective, and so on and so forth, right? And so we went into this whole neuromorphic computing thing, right? And
Mm-hmm.
there was no idea of going into blockchain or making a crypto project or anything. Actually, the whole research was around how can we do computations faster.
Okay.
And we started off building our own clusters of our own technology, which we created, the Dynex chips. I don't want to get too much into the details, but at one point we realized that actually, where is this computing power in the world? And it's actually mining, in proof of work mining, right? That's where
Okay.
tons of energy is being spent. I mean, we are talking about huge carbon emissions, about huge energy of entire countries is being used for hashing, for proof of work, right?
Right.
And my definition or our definition of proof of work is basically confirming blocks by finding hashes, which is basically nothing really from a mathematical perspective, nothing really sophisticated, right? It's basically almost like brute forcing with a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of randomness, right? A different kind of whatever hashing algorithm you use, but basically every block, tons of energy is being spent in finding the hash or the nonce, right? In order
Right.
to confirm that block, and then this whole energy which was spent is being thrown away.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And we define proof of useful work as not spending all the entire energy into simply hashing and then throwing it away, but using the majority of the energy being spent in computing something useful. That's
Right.
basically our definition of proof of useful work, right?
Now, I would push back a little bit. I don't think that I don't like to say the proof of work is throwing it away. I think the value of security is important for proof of work in general. I'm a little bit more of an old school I guess proof of work Bitcoin guy from that perspective. I think so. I push back a little bit on that term, but I think being able to utilize that energy to do even more and become more efficient is definitely the path that proof of work needs to move towards.
Yes, yes. And the thing is, I agree with you. Obviously, securing a network is absolutely valuable, but to what extent? I mean, you could also secure the entire Bitcoin network with 10% of the energy. Just have
Yeah,
less money.
so where that comes into play, if you want to be completely honest, is that you have to make it financially prohibitive for entire countries to attack the network. Because at the end of the day, what you're going to see is countries that have the funds and the means to attack networks do
Yeah,
it if they can, if that network is something they deem a threat to their economy, and so on, right? So you see things like Hillary Clinton in the US coming out and saying, miners are a threat to the reserve currency or reserve currency
yeah,
status of the US dollar. And it's like, well, if she actually if there was some sort of like government push to try to attack the Bitcoin network, then then having the full 100% of the security in place is going to make that cost prohibitive, even though Bitcoin could function with like 90% less of the security.
yeah,
Fees.
yeah. No, I mean, you have a valid point. Nevertheless, we believe that in our case, for example, 5% is being used for hashing, 95% of the power is being used for computations,
Mm-hmm.
which are much more efficient than with any other computing model. That actually also helps a lot, right?
Yeah,
Because
and there's a lot of stuff that's going on in Dynex that I definitely have like very basic questions for. So because neuromorphic, like obviously, I think that's a term that a lot of people when they first see it, sounds like more of like a publicity
very
thing or an
buzzwords.
advertisement.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
and I think that's because people don't understand what it is, right?
Yeah,
So maybe a basic understanding or explanation of neuromorphic computing would be awesome, for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah, so basically, you can achieve neuromorphic computing with different ways. We chose neuromorphic computing based on memory stores,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
But technically, the difference between regular computing and neuromorphic computing, you can envision it. Regular computing is basically 0, 1, right? You have two states, right? And neuromorphic computing is not having 0 and 1, is having basically a scale of energy between -1 and +1 volt, for example, right?
Okay.
So it's basically utilizing the whole range of voltages, which allows the computations to be inherent parallel. Because basically a neuromorphic computation does not need to access memory all the time, because given the fact that it can basically store and remember sort of, right, what was the energy flow before in there, does remove the requirement to access memory all the time. So that means in a neuromorphic setup, you have, let's say, 100,000 memory stores, and all of them can calculate in parallel, which leads to very similar characteristics like a four-state quantum model, for example,
Okay.
right? And so that's to summarize, right? It is not something we invented, by the way. It's something which researchers around the world have tried and have been doing before. And actually, the first memristor was invented in the 70s, even, right? They call it the force missing circuit element. It's
Okay.
just now that it's became more popular because now it's possible to interestingly simulate that quite efficiently.
And so that's what's basically taking place on the network for or the useful work side of things is simulating this neuromorphic computing.
Correct. That's exactly what's happening.
Okay. Because I think another thing that a lot of people get confused about as well as do I, there was this talk of a neuromorphic chip that was being developed by Dynex. What's the status of that, and what is the purpose of that? Does that replace the need for GPUs in the future as well?
So as I explained before, right, memory stores is, and especially ideal memory stores, is a circuit element which cannot be built in the moment. It's not possible to really physically build it, but you can make a circuit design, a chip design. You can say, okay, you put in five memristors here, and you put a transistor here and there, and you connect it all together. You make a circuit design.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you were to build it, and if it would be possible to build it, you can basically compute at speeds which is unheard of, right? But it's not possible.
Okay.
But what turned out that researchers found out, even if you simulate those circuit designs, which we call the Dynex chips,
Okay.
even then, obviously, you're not as fast as if it would be a real hardware piece. But if you have enough GPUs, right, contributing to it, you get all the desired features of the same output as if it would be a real circuit, right?
So basically, you're simulating that, like we said before, just restating, but you're simulating this neuromorphic chip with, as provided you have enough GPU power to contribute to it.
Correct. And that was the reason why we said we need to go crypto, because that's where the GPUs are, right? Because
Right.
Ethereum, I mean, you know anyway how that works, right? There's a lot of unused GPU power available, and we said,
Especially
why
right
not?
now, right after
Yeah,
the merge
exactly.
for Ethereum. Okay.
Yeah. So
That
why
makes
not
sense.
repurpose that, right? And nobody has done it before. I mean, all the research we have seen, and including our team, we all have limited GPU resources eventually. Right? I mean, if you look at the Dynex network today, we have like something like 20, 30,000 workers up and running, right? So then
Mhm.
imagine how many GPUs are operating right there. That alone is quite interesting. But on the other side, building a system like this on a crypto network comes with a lot of challenges, because it's a, what we call, it's a malleable environment, right? I mean, miners come and go, they switch on, switch off. Today you have that hash power, tomorrow you have this hash power. So it was very important to basically create some sort of a job management system, right? Which is basically dealing with miners coming and going, resources coming and going, and yet still providing the network efficiency. And this is what you all have heard, Mallob. And
Right.
we all
Okay.
love our Mallob.
Yeah, I was definitely going to ask about the Malab endpoints and what their role was for sure.
Yeah, but it's a crucial and essential part of the ecosystem, right? And we are improving it, and we are making it better and more scalable over time. And I think we are at a pretty good state right now. But technically, Mallob is responsible of sending your GPUs, or defining what your GPU has to do exactly.
Right.
What job is
That's
it
how I
working on? What
understood
time
it.
is it on?
And that's kind of how I was explaining it to people as well, is that was my understanding, is that's basically the Malab endpoint is your job distribution, right? If somebody has a job, or a job gets submitted from the client side to the endpoint, and then that goes out to the GPU side or whatever, right?
Correct. And
Now,
let's say the client, sorry to complete your
yeah,
thought.
go ahead.
And the client would say, you know what, I want to compute something. I want to simulate, let's say, 500,000 Dynex chips for a period of, like, say, 10 blocks, or until it's solved, right? And then the next miners, which are basically being started and connected to the Mallob system, are being assigned these 500,000 chips, for example.
Right. So that, and then I think there's so many directions I could go here with questions, because I have a ton surrounding this. But first one, I think, especially from a GPU mining perspective, a fundamental crypto perspective would be, like, does this hurt decentralization of the network? And the question really comes down to, is there going to be a future in which Malab endpoints are kind of open sourced, and anybody's able to stand those up in front of their pools, of course, or alongside their pools? We've seen, issues with, like, Zerg pools never stood one up, some examples like that. How is that accessibility? Because there also is, like, well, we'll start with that. Malab endpoint decentralization. How does that play out to make, obviously you're talking about that would help with scalability, along with everything else.
Yeah. So basically, I mean, most likely you have followed the project since a while, so you know that we are building iteratively, right? So
Right.
basically, we are launching things step by step, and we're improving. So when we launched, for example, Dynex in September last year, there was basically everything was proof of work, and then running Dynex chips was basically an option, right? That helped us to learn, how to deal with all these different environments, right? With all these different speeds and so on and so forth. Then we said, okay, we're gonna launch Dynex Solve, which was on December 1st, which was basically
Right.
making proof of useful work, or let's call it a GPU work, right? Or the neuromorphic computations, the centerpiece of calculations. And we immediately ran into issues that people tried to exploit it. We had to remove the source code. Now after a lot of security enhancements, we were able to release most of the source code again for the miners. And now we have commercial miners, which helped a lot. And then we basically started off basically distributing malloc endpoints everywhere, right? So because we have, obviously, it is per definition right now still a centralized system, the malloc system, but it doesn't need to be, right? But in terms of roadmap, I mean, we are now 7 months old, and we are doing something that nobody else has done before. So we have to learn step by step, right?
Right.
Now we have a stable environment in terms of malloc, but we also know that decentralization is obviously not the future, right? Decentralization is obviously something which will be part of. So malloc is going to be decentralized eventually, for
Right.
sure. There's no reason to have a centralized malloc system, because if you have a lot of smaller jobs, right, and yet it's not necessary that everyone has the information in real time, because even if let's say a 5-second delay when a job is solved doesn't really hurt the network, right? So our plan is, from a development perspective, now we are centralized, and then we are going to have the Dynex Marketplace, which is basically sort of the self-service platform where people can post their own jobs. And in conjunction with the Dynex Solve Marketplace, we will also have malloc entirely decentralized. So basically everything from a database perspective, we have learned enough now. We actually spec'd it out last weekend already. We learned enough now how to actually utilize it, how to structure it from a technical perspective, how the dynamic parameter tuning works best, and so on and so forth. Now it's going to be entirely decentralized, being part of the node.
Awesome. Cool.
And as soon as it's part of the node, I can switch off the centralized malloc,
Yep.
and it's going to be all open source, obviously.
And then presumably that means that miners may have eventually in the future here the option to mine directly to their own nodes at some point.
Of course,
Perfect.
it's all gonna come back, and then malloc is also then the pools. I mean, it's then basically they run their own nodes, right? And if they have good infrastructure, it's no issue. And the more nodes we have, right, the more scalable and the more stable everything is. And the malloc issue, like getting like a global outage of malloc, is a thing of the past, right?
Awesome.
And
Yeah.
that's the plan, right? And this is what we're doing. But we had to go through step by step. We cannot. I personally find it impossible to launch everything in one shot. I mean, imagine we would have probably already killed the whole Dynex project by it, right? It's better to do it step by step, take the learnings, and then now we know the code base. Now we know where we have to put it. Now we know how to deal with it, etc., etc.
So it's really interesting to hear that. I mean, at the end of the day, Dynex wasn't initially developed to be a crypto project. It was initially developed to be this kind of scientific test for neuromorphic computing. And then it was like, well, where can we obtain the computing power to actually do this? And it was like, well, there's a bunch of GPUs left over from things like the merge from Ethereum and so on, and a bunch of crypto miners that we can leverage to do that. So let's move that direction, right?
Correct.
That's fascinating because I think a lot of people get a misconception of what it is, right? They look at it, and I can tell you that, like, at first, when you pull up the website, it's a little bit like, okay, what is this, right? I don't really understand it. So,
Yeah.
I think definitely the next question I have, because it's like I don't get this, is what is like, are there any projects that are currently utilizing this useful work, and what are their success levels for this? How important has it been up to this point? I know I've seen some work. What kind of work, or what type of work is being used right now with Dynex?
So basically, every single top 2,000 company is at a scale where it's facing untractable problems. That comes without saying, right?
Can you say
Now,
that again? What type of problems?
intractable, right? Basically, problems
Okay.
they cannot solve right now, right?
Okay.
Now, currently, our plan is to support a number of different job types, which is basically in relation to artificial intelligence. It's like pre-training of machine learning models, federated machine learning, all these kind of things,
Mm-hmm.
right? So basically, everyone doing machine learning will be a potential customer for Dynex. Second, optimization problems. And I know that's not really common for people to understand what is an optimization problem, but optimization problems are everywhere. And we are very glad because right now we are boarding customers on a more like on a business development on a step-by-step basis, right? We are getting in touch with them, and we are doing it because we don't have a marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them allow us to speak about it. Some of them say we don't want to be mentioned, which is also fine.
Yeah.
But most more recent use cases are, for example, and you probably have seen it, it was Kali Global,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And it sounded also a little bit abstract by explaining what it is. They had to build a pedestrian walkway, right? And the customer wanted to have some really interesting shape of a roof, right? For example, right? It was like more like a very organic shape of a roof. Now, in order to construct it as an architect, you need to basically, from a statical perspective, you need to position the columns in a way that it's still possible to be a walkway, but it also needs to be statically stable, right? You don't want this whole thing to break down.
Okay.
Now, that's a typical job of a statical engineer, and obviously they have tools, and they have actually very sophisticated tools. They do even evolutionary positioning of these columns, right? And it takes them, let's say, a month to sit down and to basically find the optimum positioning of these columns so this whole thing is stable, right? And I got now, not a while ago, we started talking, and he said, cannot Dynex compute that faster? And I said, well, let's give it a try, right?
Mm-hmm.
He said, okay, what format do you support? Obviously, we support industry standard formats. So they basically sent us the problem. We put it into the network. They had the whole board of directors sitting in the meeting room and wanted to watch how it's done. And before they even turned on the projector, it was already solved because it took 1 minute because he needed an accuracy of 99.99%.
Yeah.
And then he said, okay, so what now? I said, okay, well, I really don't know what I even calculated here or what Dynex calculated here, right? Please tell me, is it useful for you? And then I don't hear anything for an hour. And 1 hour later, he wrote back and said, I mean, this is just unbelievable. His statical engineer was sitting there. He said, Dynex came up with a positioning of those columns no human would have ever thought of. And it is perfection, he said. And that whole thing in 1 minute versus using all evolutionary algorithms and I don't know what the statical engineer would have been using for a month, and he would not even come up with a solution like that, right? So just to give an example, that's an optimization problem, right? And you find optimization problems also in drug discovery, right?
Mm-hmm.
Finding medicine faster, right? And you find it in everywhere, basically, right? So the market we're operating here, artificial intelligence combined with optimization problems, because these go kind of hand in hand, because an artificial intelligence model in reality is also nothing else than finding a set of optimum weights to a model in order to have a model which can compute something, right? Be it speech recognition or whatever it is, right? Makes Dynex a very, very interesting use case.
Awesome. So the one thing that the use case is amazing. I've been following as along as I can, as well as I can, and thanks for explaining all that for sure. The next thing is obviously with cryptocurrency comes this additional factor that is a token that has a price tied to it.
Yeah,
And how does that play a role in Dynex and Dynex, overall kind of goal at the end of the day? Dynex has the DNX token, right? And I
yeah.
think currently the price is around 18 cents or whatever. What does that mean to you? How does that help the project move forward? How will that be utilized?
So this is a very good question. So what differentiates most likely Dynex from other coins which miners could mine is that there is not only a block reward and the transaction fees being paid to miners, but there's also a block fee, right? So basically, if somebody books computation time on a network, he will say, okay, I want to, as I said before, I want to have 500,000 Dynex chips for the next 10 blocks or 100 blocks or whatever. Block time on average is 2 minutes, right? Or until it's solved. And I'm going to pay the amount of X, Y, Z. So obviously, this needs to be tied to fiat because it cannot be that a computation time costs him 100,000 euros a second or something like this, right?
Uh-huh.
But it ensures, because at one point all coins will have been mined and the block reward will be very small before, right?
Right.
But we need to be attractive for miners because otherwise we do not have a network to compute with, right? So basically, rather than going for the models where somebody can rent out his GPU power for an amount of X, we said, okay, we're gonna basically combine it and integrate it with a block fee. And that makes it forever sustainable in a sustainable way, interesting and also profitable for a miner. That's the goal. But it is also in a price range that a customer, I mean, what's the price tag for the example I gave you before? Having a guy, an instructional designer sitting for a month and not coming up with a right solution versus finding a solution in 1 minute. How much should I charge for this? Right? This is like it is we are selling a product here practically which provides solutions to problems which are very hard to solve actually with other technology, right? So it is more or less infinite, right? So basically we found it more fair to tie it really to the computation power being provided, to the number of chips and the blocks, and in reverse, having a long-term sustainable model for the miners.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, I mean that makes sense. Do you think that there's going to be any regulatory issues surrounding that?
So to be honest, I mean, if we are a true utility coin. I mean, we have legal opinions on the table, right? We are not a security or whatever, right? We are a real utility coin use case, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think from that perspective, we are in the, let's put it like this, the most safest corner of all the cryptocurrencies. You never know what's gonna happen.
Right. Yeah.
We got contacted by some government bodies multiple times already, being interested in utilizing our technology for different things. That's why we also will talk about an ethics committee in the future, because we want to ensure that only good things are being calculated on our network, because it could be abused as well, right, with any other technology. And I don't think that from a regulatory perspective, I mean, we have now started the incorporation process in Liechtenstein, which is part of the European Union. So it's basically part of this new crypto law, which has been issued in the European Union. So we're all like compliant with everything, right? I think as long as we have the right team of advisors and we do the right thing, I think we are on the safe side.
Nice. Well, and that brings up another, I think you brought up another interesting point there as well. Now it's slipping from me. I'll just have to move on from it. Oh, what did you just say there? Because we were talking about regulation.
Utility coin versus tokens.
Well, that's pretty
Ethics
straightforward,
committee.
right?
Maybe ethics committee.
Do what?
No, maybe with respect to the ethical committee, we wanna establish for using our technology for good computations versus.
Yeah, that was the one that I'm interested in. Is there going to be something implemented for censorship on the network as
So
far as the
basic,
type of work that's being allowed?
wonderful question. Wonderful question. And I've been asked, and it's not so obvious the answer. So as long as the problems are relatively small, we can easily push them through on the net on the marketplace. We don't even have to look at it, because real problems, which are basically a threat to, let's say, nuclear power plants or encryption methods or something like this, are very, very complex problems. And they have also a unique fingerprint. So as soon as we see on a marketplace coming in a really complex calculation, we will get in touch with the person or with the company who has submitted it, and we want to review it through the ethical committee.
Okay.
So our estimate is the 95% of all jobs, or maybe even more, are gonna be automated, simpler ones. They just run for a few minutes or a few hours, no problem. Still a great result for everyone. But I think we can very, very well identify which are potentially threatening the ethical aspect of the computations.
Awesome. So let's wrap this up. I don't know when the video is going to be launched, but today, as of recording, for everybody that's watching this now, it's April 23rd, 2023. The Dynex Discord experienced a pretty severe hack yesterday. Give us the lowdown on, what happened, how did that end up taking place, and what are the steps being taken moving forward to secure that?
Yeah. So basically, unfortunately, this morning we found the situation that our Discord, our Dynex Discord account had been compromised. So basically, somebody managed between time frame was approximately 10 p.m. UTC until 8 a.m. UTC this morning. Somebody had full access on our Discords. So basically what happened is they removed all the possibilities for anyone, for the community, for administrators, for moderators, for practically anyone. Nobody was able of commenting, posting, writing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they posted in our name an airdrop scam, where they basically invited users to click on a dynexcoin.xyz
Yep.
address, exchanging a MetaMask. I mean, we are level
Yeah.
180 flag one. I mean, all the red flags, obviously, but nevertheless, it's really a bad thing. It should have never happened. We obviously regained control this morning. Everything is back to normal. Had to re-invite a few people, which were kicked out, I think, including yourself.
Yep.
And that is horrible. And the first analysis showed it was a very, very well structured hack where it was social engineered. Basically, it was not really it was not done on a technological weakness or something. It was actually one of our team basically clicked on a wrong link. What I would call it like that, right?
Yep.
And that means also there was not enough training and awareness of everyone who has administrative rights on our server.
Yeah, awareness training for your administrators is extremely important. Now, it's hard on smaller communities too, because a lot of people are doing this, out of the goodness of their hearts. So you feel kind of like, oh, take it easy on them. But the reality of it now these days is you have to enforce anybody that's going to be, administering any of your accounts, period, that they enable things like MFA and they go through some sort of awareness training, right?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And these are the measurements we've taken. So on Tuesday is already the first training for the people, right? We have enforced some other restrictions on account management. We removed administrative rights somewhere and here and there, and then we're gonna for sure implement a 24/7 monitoring on Discord, and also with a possibility, some sort of like a hotline, which is, I mean, some of our either it's me or somebody else from our team needs to have the red phone, and if that rings, doesn't matter if it's 4 o'clock in the morning or not, it needs to be taken care of, right? For example, so
Yeah,
somebody monitors and finds this. So all these escalation procedures are currently being put up. We're also gonna publish a post-mortem analysis, exactly what happened, why, and what we will do, because we think transparency is key here, right? People need to know what's happened, why it happened, and why it will not happen most likely in the future anymore. Only Discord was obviously affected. No other system was affected. Nothing. There was no virus. It was really a socially engineered hack. But I must say, They knew exactly the on-off patterns of the admins. They knew it's Saturday nights. They knew everything. I mean, that had been prepared for a while.
Yep, and I mean that's pretty common, especially in something like Discord, where it is easier to learn about people as well. So, social engineering is crazy these days. You got to be extremely careful. But thanks for that rundown. Thanks for coming on. Definitely got to learn a lot more about Dynex. I'm super excited to share this with everybody on my channel. So hopefully everybody has a better understanding, and I look forward to watching the project grow and seeing where it goes from here. So thank
you so much. Anytime. Happy to talk again.
Let's do it again. And for sure. All right, sons.
All right.
Thanks for watching. I'll see you next Tuesday.
Thank you,
sir.
Bye.
Today's sponsor is myself. I recently launched a crypto mining e-course at sonofatech.com, and it includes 9 steps to cover when you decide to start your crypto mining journey. This is specifically pertaining to 2023 crypto mining profits and taking advantage of the down market to achieve skyrocketing growth as we move into the next halving of Bitcoin. You'll learn buying mining equipment in a bear market, using outside investment to speculative mine, begin mining once profit is established, sell mine crypto to pay for electricity, hold and prep for the bull run, sell at the top of the bull market, sell mining equipment at the top of the bull market, and begin investing in land and power so that you can bring in outside investors to utilize excess resources. Thanks everybody for your support, and I hope you enjoy the course. Let me know what you think of it in the comment section below.